In the early 2000s, a strange Porsche began appearing on European endurance grids. Not strange because of its sound, or because of its shape, but because of a massive air intake sitting proudly on its roof. It looked almost improvised, as if someone had bolted a ventilation tube onto a 911 at the last minute. But nothing about that scoop was random. It symbolized a problem, a solution, and a chapter of Porsche history that very few people even know exists. Today, we're going to dive into why this bizarre-looking 996 GT3 R was created, and why it became one of the most resilient GT cars Porsche ever built. By the late 1990s, Porsche needed a successor to the legendary 993 GT2 for customer racing teams. Regulations were changing, endurance races were getting tougher, and rivals were stepping up fast. Porsche's answer was the 996 GT3 R, lighter, stiffer, and powered by the bulletproof 3.6 Mesger engine. On paper, it was perfect, but there was a hidden enemy that no dyno, no engineer, and no wind tunnel could defeat: heat inside the cockpit. In races lasting 6, 12, or 24 hours, temperatures inside the 996 could exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Pilots were emerging from stints dehydrated, dizzy, and mentally foggy. You don't win endurance races like that. You barely survive them. Instead of developing a complex cooling system, Porsche took a dramatically simpler path. Engineers cut into the roof and installed a giant scoop that force-fed fresh air directly into the cockpit. No fancy electronics, no climate control, just airflow, violent, raw, and constant. The scoop didn't help the engine. It didn't improve aerodynamics. In fact, it probably made the car slightly less efficient. But that wasn't the point. That piece of ducting kept a human being functional during hours of torture inside one of the most punishing environments in motorsport. It was crude, it was unglamorous, but it worked. With or without the roof vent, the 996 GT3 R was already a war machine. It wasn't the fastest GT on the grid, but it might have been the toughest. The Mesger 3.6 could handle high heat and repeated abuse without breaking a sweat. The chassis was rigid, predictable, and friendly to privateer teams who couldn't afford failures. It wasn't a hero car. It wasn't a poster car. But it was a finisher, and in endurance racing, finishers win more often than the fragile rockets. Soon, the roof vent became an unofficial badge of honor. The teams that ran the hardest races, the VLN, the 24 hours of Nürburgring, the grueling European enduros, all opted for the roof scoop. It meant the car wasn't just racing, it was surviving. Any Porsche with that massive tube on the roof was instantly recognized as a car built for hell. Not for speed, not for beauty, for endurance. Endurance racing is rarely about the car alone. It's about the human trapped inside it. Drivers spoke of the 996 cockpit as an oven. Some stints left them lightheaded and nauseous. Others had memory gaps after climbing out of the car. The roof vent changed that. For many, it was the difference between finishing a race and collapsing halfway through. It gave drivers back their reflexes, their awareness, their stamina, the things that actually win races when fatigue sets in and mistakes become lethal. Porsche's decision wasn't as crude as it looked. It was part of a deeper philosophy: solve real problems with simple, reliable solutions. In endurance racing, a complex system can ruin a race with a single glitch. A tube on the roof cannot. It never overheats, never fails, never shuts down. And if it gives the driver even a 5% performance improvement at hour 4, hour 8, or hour 21, that's worth more than any aerodynamic gain. The 996 GT3 R never got the glory of its siblings. It wasn't as iconic as the GT1, as glamorous as the RS models, or as successful as the later RSRs. It lived in the background, a workhorse, not a superstar. But without it, the GT3 class wouldn't look the way it does today. It set the foundation for everything that came after: reliability, accessibility, and efficiency. It proved that a GT car didn't need to be exotic to be victorious. It just had to last. Today, most people don't even know this roof vent version existed. There are barely any documentaries about it. Few photos survive. It appears in old footage like a ghost, a strange Porsche with a tube on its head. But this car represents a chapter of motorsport where engineering wasn't about marketing. It was about grit, about solving problems in the quickest, smartest way possible, about pushing both machine and driver to the edge of exhaustion. The 996 GT3 R may never be celebrated the way other Porsche race cars are. But its legacy is woven into modern GT racing. It taught Porsche to build cars around the realities of endurance, not just the fantasies. It reminded everyone that performance isn't only measured by horsepower or lap times, but by consistency and resilience. And that roof vent, strange, awkward, impossible to forget, remains the perfect symbol of what endurance racing truly is. Not glamour, not perfection, survival. Endurance racing isn't just a battle against competitors, it's a battle against nature itself. Rain, fog, wind, darkness, and heat all try to break both machine and driver. The 996 GT3 R with its roof vent became a symbol of adaptation. While other teams experimented with cooling suits, complex air conditioning modules, or helmet cooling lines that frequently failed, the Porsche teams using the roof vent relied on something primal: raw airflow. When storms hit the Eifel Mountains and temperatures swung dramatically from cold to humid, that vent allowed the driver to remain stable. It was a small but crucial weapon in the war against the elements, proving once again that in endurance racing, simplicity often defeats sophistication. One reason the 996 GT3 R gained such a strong reputation was its accessibility. It wasn't built just for factory teams, it was designed for privateers who needed reliability above all else. These teams didn't have endless budgets or fleets of spare parts. They needed a car that could take punishment, lap after lap, without demanding constant attention. The roof vent variant embodied this philosophy perfectly. No fancy tech to maintain, no fragile components, no risk of failure. Just airflow and endurance. For many small teams, this Porsche wasn't just a race car. It was a lifeline, the one machine that allowed them to compete against giants. There's a reason the Nürburgring is considered the most brutal testing ground on Earth. It exposes weaknesses instantly. The 996 GT3 R was forged there. Every bump, every elevation change, every stretch of full throttle abuse shaped its development. And that roof vent wasn't added because it looked cool, but because the Nordschleife demanded it. Hour after hour, the heat inside the cockpit would build relentlessly. The Porsche's body trapped more temperature than expected, creating a hostile environment. The vent was the car's evolution under pressure, a direct response to the circuit's cruelty. In many ways, the Nordschleife sculpted the 996 as much as Porsche's engineers did. Among Porsche enthusiasts, the 996 generation has always been controversial, from its fried egg headlights to its move to water cooling. But the GT3 R with the roof vent sits even further outside the family tree. It's the forgotten anomaly, the unpolished cousin that never fit the marketing image. Yet that's what makes it fascinating. It represents a raw, experimental era for Porsche motorsport, one where solutions weren't filtered through brand aesthetics or public perception. They were built for the track, for the moment, for survival. And because of that, this car carries an authenticity that modern race cars rarely show. You won't find posters of the roof vent 996 GT3 R in Porsche dealerships. But its fingerprints are all over modern GT3 machinery. Today's race cars feature improved cockpit airflow, refined ventilation channels, and cooling strategies born from lessons learned in the early 2000s. The idea that the driver's performance is as important as the engine's efficiency, that came from cars like this one. The 996 GT3 R proved that a fast car becomes useless if the human inside isn't able to operate at peak capacity. That philosophy echoes in every modern endurance machine, making this strange, forgotten Porsche more influential than it ever received credit for. In the world of prototype-level touring cars, attention naturally gravitates toward the giants, the factory Audis and Mercedes that dominated the headlines. But the Astra V8 Coupe had a different kind of presence, a quiet menace. It wasn't built to play politics. It wasn't designed to be a marketing trophy. It existed for one purpose: to prove that Opel could run with the apex predators of German motorsport. And when it hit the Nürburgring, the car didn't behave like a midfield experiment. It behaved like a threat, especially in the hands of drivers who understood how to extract aggression from its rigid chassis and high-revving V8. The Astra didn't just show up. It disrupted, silently, efficiently, relentlessly. No matter how advanced the Astra V8 was, nothing at the time could fully tame the Nürburgring. Every lap was a handshake with danger. The aero was optimized for clean air, but the mountain forest delivered turbulence. The suspension was tuned for stability, but the bumps at Schwedenkreuz punished any setup that wasn't perfect. And through all of this, the Astra's naturally aspirated V8 screamed at over 11,000 revolutions per minute, begging its drivers to push deeper into the unknown. There's a reason the Nordschleife is called the Green Hell. It doesn't care about your engineering. It doesn't care about your budget. It measures only commitment. And the Astra's drivers? They committed everything. Every component inside the Astra V8 Coupe was built around pure functionality. The carbon chassis wasn't about exotic materials, it was about survival. The pushrod suspension wasn't about prestige, it was about precision. The V8 wasn't crafted for a spec sheet, it was tuned to deliver power instantly, with no hesitation and no forgiveness. Even the cooling system had a brutal honesty to it. If temperatures spiked, performance dropped. If performance dropped, the race was lost. Opel's engineers built the Astra like a surgeon wields a scalpel, not to impress, but to cut deep. And in racing, cutting deep means winning time where others lose it. Speed wasn't the problem, power wasn't the problem, the nature of the Astra was the problem. Its weight distribution punished mistakes. Its sharp steering meant tiny inputs became massive reactions. And its aero platform demanded perfection, because if the front end washed out at high speed, the entire car became unstable. It was a machine that rewarded bravery but devoured hesitation. On a track like Nürburgring, that dynamic became a knife edge: commit fully, or don't commit at all. Many drivers described it as precise but unforgiving, the kind of car that taught you respect at 250 km per hour. Even though the Astra V8 Coupe disappeared from the spotlight after Opel withdrew from DTM, its influence echoed. The concept of using a silhouette body over a purpose-built race chassis became the standard across Europe. The V8 architecture inspired future GT programs. Its aero philosophy reappeared in later touring cars, and its impact on Nürburgring endurance racing can still be felt in how teams approach chassis rigidity and high-speed stability today. The Astra didn't just race, it educated the next generation of engineers.